naturally leans into the next EC we'll be talking about, which does this as well, but does have a creative angle to it, which is robotics. Before we get into robotics, just curious, what are you guys interested in? Speech and debate, math, I've listed out a bunch, but there can be others as well. You can fill in the poll just so I get a sense of what you guys are interested in. Take a few seconds. You can fill in your answers. Okay, a lot for robotics. That's helpful because this is the section for that. So robotics is a great channel for creativity and logic, right? Beyond just logic development, it is very creative. It leads to construction and design. When you like building things, this is the way to go. And it gives you a sense of teamwork and structure as well, because when you do this at the higher level, you are always working in a team. It gives you an early stage abstract thinking. What do I mean by that? It means at a very early level, you'll be able to understand different phases and how they work with each other, right? Sort of like managing a project. It is very important for that angle. You're not really teaching your kids how to do project management, but the fundamentals are the same. How does one phase connect to the other, and that connect to the next? How do I make all these things work together? And finally is the cognitive development. If kids are good at robotics early, it definitely lends itself towards logical development. The best way to get into this extracurricular activity is to rely on no external resource. This is one of those where you can pretty much do it yourself. So that is our recommendation, and we'll tell you how to exactly. There is a lot of Lego, and this might seem obvious to you guys, but it's important to pick the right ones. Lego, and specifically, I'll give you examples for the ones that are the best for mechanical side of things, and competitions. So you need to get these resources yourself and supplement them with competitions, so it's more than just a fun activity. Of course, if you just prefer it being fun, that's no harm as well. But if you want to take it to another level where you can work in a team environment and compete, which itself has its own skills, then it is very important to supplement this with competitions. So for Lego, the first one is practical building. Now, by that, it's just simple blocks where you're just building just aesthetical objects for lower elementary kids specifically. I'm sure you guys must have bought your kids some sort of Lego, and it's important to see if they're interested in it, because if you're not interested in the practical building and design part, it's less likely that you will like to go on further. Then comes the mechanical stage, where you're doing construction to understand structure and phases, as I said earlier. Let's look at this one here. This is the mechanical part. And usually it involves a bunch of different parts that are connected together, and together they make one huge object. This doesn't necessarily have to be a racetrack. It can be something like I've seen nowadays, Legos are just wonderful. You have mining sites, something that is more expansive and has different parts. Do not go for Lego pieces that are focused on one part. Yes, it's good. Everything has its benefits, but purely from a mechanical perspective, you want to take different moving pieces that fit in together as one big phase. So that's good for lower elementary as well. And so grade 1 to 2, you can get into these things. And mid-elementary students, if they're interested by now, if they're into mechanical building, they will definitely be looking at robotics. So mid-elementary students try to understand moving parts in basic engineering. And this is different from phases because different parts are now moving. And how are you supposed to layer one on top of each other so that everything is working correctly? So that's where basic circuits and robots come in. And we'll get into a little bit of that as well. Before I move on to the competitions, here are some suggestions that I can give you. For mechanical, you have a lot of options, but like I said, try to go for Lego sets that are more expansive and is more of different parts that you're building together. Something like just a car is not a good idea because it's just focused on building one thing. It's not bad per se, but if you're just looking at it from a mechanical perspective, you want to make sure there's different phases so that you're planning your build. And for robotics, there is a specific company called Technic. You can write that down. Technic is the best one. I personally myself was heavily into Lego, still am. I actually have a whole room filled with Lego. I love telling that to everyone I see. So Technic is the best one, and it has variations where you can have the circuits in there. Now, when you start off, it's okay to use the manual. Parents always ask me like, oh, is it fine if you use the manual? But if you're doing this, try to do this as a team activity with your kid and try to question them on why is it that we are having a motor here? What is the function, right? Question them as you go and build. That's the best way for them to start thinking about moving parts. Again, Technic is the best one out there. And then you have to supplement them with competitions. So the first Lego League is by far the most, I would say, diverse competition because it makes room for elementary school. Usually robotics is found either at a local competition that is pretty domestic. It's not at a national stage or statewide, or it's for higher level students. The first Lego League is pretty well known, and it's good for elementary students. So there's different competitions for that. The junior first Lego League tournament is for kindergarten to third grade. This is where you have to build a finished Lego brick and display it. Pretty basic. Again, you work in teams, so that's what's wonderful about it. The first Lego League is from fourth grade. You can all second grade to fourth grade. Switch that up over there. And you have to build robots with certain functions. So this is where the mechanical part comes in. And it's based on the Mindstorm series. You can Google this and YouTube this. It's pretty helpful because it's more like educational Lego where you'll be learning the different aspects of the moving pieces. So I do recommend looking at that series as well. Now, when you get to the higher grade, this is the same competition, first Lego League. Again, not associated with any of these. It's just the best ones out there. FLL, there's junior first to senior third. This is where you'll be choosing materials that are not limited to Lego, but more just pieces to build a more complex robot. And FRC is the junior 3 to senior 3, slightly more advanced. This is where you will be making robots from scratch based on the topic and conduct 3v3 adversarial competitions. This is the higher stage of robotics and the competitions that do supplement that. Besides that, however, if you do continue and say you do have some sort of success at the elementary stage, let's say even not success, let's say you don't get a medal, but you're passionate about it, then you should go on to pursue other competitions like the International Olympic Robotics Competition. In this, the regular season is divided into elementary school, junior high, and high school group competitions. There's different phases to this, and the engineering competition is limited to high school and university students only. So you have different competitions, each for a different level. Why am I honing in on this one? The International Olympic Robotics Competition and VEX. These two are very important. First, before I get into the significance, the VEX Robotics World Championship is sponsored by the Robotics Education and Competition Foundation of the United States. It's also broadcasted all over ESPN. VEX robots do have a higher requirement. So beyond just mechanical abilities, you do have to know basic programming. And nowadays, there's plenty of workshops that you can get into. I would always recommend do not force it onto the child. If they are showing that they are resistant towards it, do it as an activity, not a competition, right? Do it as a fun activity. Let's learn something new. If you like it, then great. If you don't, we're going to think of different ways, so at least you know about it. And VEX and the International Olympic Robotics Competitions is very important. Think of it as the National Spelling Bee, but for robotics, because this is where you do gain some recognition that goes beyond just supplementing your learning. It goes beyond that because it gives you an edge in higher education as well. College applications, do look out for these two competitions specifically. It does help you shine in terms of your extracurriculars. It gives you the edge because it is nationalized and it is on a big stage. The best external resources that you can use if you don't want to go with the do-it-yourself approach and competitions, say you were too busy to get into all of this and looking for the right units, although I do recommend putting some time in it, is I have listed, this is specific to the Bay Area, is, as you can see, I've listed each of the best centers for robotics based on the location. So SF and Marin, Tech Know-how is a very good one. In fact, Tech Know-how is the best one. Silicon Valley, Silver Creek Academy is the best one. East Bay, the Growing Room is great. Now take all of this with a grain of salt because it's heavily based on the location. And these rankings were purely based on reviews and some knowledge that I did know from the parents. So you have to research yourself. It is heavily location specific. Some institutions do claim they go into robotics like Mathnasium and I'm not criticizing them. They are great for STEM learning, but their involvement for robotics is limited to like conceptual learning, not really understanding and building. So the DIY method is preferred. If you do have some time, it is well worth to look into.